Hey babies, and babies, and babies, and babies, and babies. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Happy Tuesday. What's up, Callow? How are you today?
I'm enjoying 3 nights off from the Caps, so like I'm getting refreshed a little bit over here. Went to the Nats game last night.
How about Ovi? This is so in line. Turning down national appearances to stay grounded, focus on the team. And I'm telling you what, he's doing the Tonight Show a favor. His interviews are terrible. He's actually doing you guys a favor, guys.
I mean, yeah, his it's funny. He has good interviews, but he has to be in the right environment. That's not it for him. He needs to have like the casual, like something's going on, and his personality comes out a little bit. That's not his place. It's not his place for that. And I believe him when he says he's tired too. I 100% believe him with that.
I totally believe that. We're going to do a sports radio segment today, Callow. I don't do a lot of these very often. So those of you who are listening live on the radio, you'll appreciate this. It'll feel very old school. Those of you who are listening to the podcast, it's not modern, but I want to do it today anyway, because I watched the game last night, the Houston-Florida National Championship game. And honestly, it is one of the worst endings I've ever seen ever of a big moment like that. And I'm like trying to think what's worse than this, because it's one thing to lose, but they had 19 seconds on the clock and couldn't get a shot off. And, you know, the guy doesn't do he had the whereabouts to know he can't touch the ball after he jumped in the air and just dropped it. And then, but, you know, the panic sets in. Nobody gets to the ball. It was literally one of the most anticlimactic endings ever. It's like one thing if you miss a shot, or like we've seen people miss layups. Like if you go back to, good Lord, like you have to go back to the 90s with the Knicks with like missed bunny layups against the Bulls that would have won games. Like that's their nightmares. But this is for a championship on the line to not even get the attempt off to see if it would actually go in or not. This is one of the worst endings I've ever seen for anyone ever.
It's one of those endings, too, where it's one thing if a shot gets missed or there's like a real defensive play. For lack of a better phrase, it's always bad when you get to throw up all over yourself.
Yes.
Like that's what it was, where he jumped. Like, not only, I do want to say this, Florida's defense was amazing. So, like, I want to give him some credit there. But, like, the jump up and then he can't touch it, and then everyone falls over, and you're like, oh no, like it's over. Like the throw up all over yourself moment, it's always so cringe, and to happen in that moment with what they had just accomplished the game before. I mean, that's the all-time anticlimactic moment if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I mean, like in singular sports, you'll always go back to this person who just kind of lost their crap, you know, at the end. Like the famous one in golf is Jean Van de Velde, who just lost it and went crazy and was just hitting the ball all over the place in the British Open, and like took his shoes off and got in a creek. And then you could see mentally breaking down, like, and it happened. And in those cases, you're like, I just feel bad for this person that they're like going there and doing this. But in a team sport, to see it end like that, like after the whole season, to be in a game like this and then to not even get the shot off, and to make the type of mistake that I don't want to kill this kid, to make the type of mistake that this kid made, like, I don't know how you get over that. Like, if they missed the shot, they missed the shot, but like they didn't even get it off. It's awful. It's just, and it'd be one thing if it was like 3 seconds on the clock. There was 19 on the clock. Like there's no reason they didn't get one or multiple chances at this.
This was the closest thing we've ever gotten from NFL clock mismanagement going into a basketball game. Like it's the only thing I could think of, like when I watched this happen last night, where I was going, this was that play where like the Cowboys did this a couple of times, where they had 30 seconds, got to play in field goal range, and then just like wasted and salted away the clock for no reason whatsoever. That's what this one felt like, where it was, you had all this time to run a play. It didn't even look like they really ran a play. Florida jumps in and plays really good defense, and then he jumps up, and you're like, oh, it's over. It's over now.
Yeah, and I like, especially like, okay, so that school, oh, for crying out loud. I mean, like they haven't been this good for this period of time since the 80s when Phi Slamma Jamma. I was talking to Archer about them. I'm like, they had one of the greatest nicknames of all time, Phi Slamma Jamma. They also had two verifiable, like 20 greatest players of all time playing for their program back at that point in time, like all time greats, including Akeem Olajuwon. And they were in the Final Fours back then. But they haven't been like this. Kelvin Sampson's an outstanding coach. And that was a very veteran laden team. Like, are they going to afford the next, level of players? I don't know. So I don't know if they're going to like continue to be able to do this. They've been right there. And after they beat Duke, I was kind of convinced last night they were going to win. And then when they got out to the lead they got out to, I'm like, oh, they're going to win. Like early in the second half, I'm like, they're going to win. They're going to get away from this team. Give Florida a lot of credit for hanging in there. I will say this too, like there was some level of nerves at the beginning of that game last night. Both teams were jacking up the craziest shots, both of them. They were not running offenses. They were throwing up very long threes. It was bricks or air balls. It was actually embarrassing to watch it. And not that I like to complain too much about the broadcasters, but I actually thought they were off the mark a little bit early because it was so sloppy, so disjointed, and the play was so ugly to watch with the shot selection and how badly they were missing them. I kind of wanted the three of them to kill them and go, you all need to calm down. Like, you're here because you're the two best teams in the country right now, but you're not playing like it. So the game itself, even early, had an extremely awkward feel to it on really both sides. Both teams were jacking up the craziest shots, or Houston was giving up slam dunks on one end and then running down the court and throwing up some 30-foot shot. It was nuts, actually.
This was actually the reason why I thought Florida was going to be okay in the second half, because I didn't like the way I didn't like how either team was really playing in the first half, but I had faith Florida was just going to settle down. And then what you just described with jacking up shots and like really not running anything, Houston kept doing that in the second half.
Yes.
It was actually baffling to me of just like, I'm not the biggest hoops head, but I know a bad offense when I see it, or bad play when I see it. And all I could think of was like, guys, one, you're chucking up these ISO shots. Two, you're chucking up the shots with 20 seconds left on the shot clock too. Like I was baffled, and how it wasn't kind of settled down over a timeout or an official timeout or whatever. I thought that was crazy. Like I don't know if the game got away from them that bad that they just weren't thinking straight, but that's why I thought kind of Florida was going to be okay, because I've seen Florida, they can pretty much overcome anything. Right away, when they were actually just running an offense, I was going, oh, they'll be okay on this one, and they did go ahead and come back.
Florida's got a really nice system. This coach coaches them well. I will say, though, early, they were disjointed, too.
Yeah, 100%.
They were crazy, too.
Yeah.
They were jacking up. Like, the first 8 minutes of the game, there was 1 million turnovers by Florida, and Houston must have been shooting 20% from the field because they were throwing up the craziest shots. Like, defensively kept Houston in it. Otherwise, if that didn't happen, Florida should have been blowing them out early the way they were playing, but they got disjointed too. It was really poorly managed. Maybe the stage was just a little too big early. Neither side settled each other down at all. And I agree that, like, for large stretches of time, Houston looked like they didn't know what they were doing. And they were throwing up the craziest shots the whole night. They took low percentage shots all night, and this is why they kept that team in the game. They should have never done so. They really should have put them away early. Had they had any wherewithal and any better shot selection early, the way they were playing defense, they should have built a pretty big lead against them. Give Florida credit. They're the ones that settled down. They're the ones that were running an offense. Their point guard is really good, like really, really, really good. This coach obviously is very good. If you watch them, I watched them play Maryland. They rooked Maryland, albeit, we all know what was going on leading into it, but still, like, they actually got Maryland to be, remember, I was complaining at the end of that one. Maryland looked crazy. They were throwing up crazy shots all over the place. Maybe they do this to you because Maryland was doing it too. Maryland seems to have this big cloud over it because of what was going on around the program at the time. But you remember watching them, I'm like, see, they don't have an offense. Look at this crazy way they're jacking up shots, 20 seconds on the shot clock. Derek Queen got to the point where he was like not even passing the ball anymore. Like, there was no discernible offense at all. It was the second time in like 3-4 games I saw Florida do that to somebody.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is that there's some way that they've pretty much said, like, let them take those weird open shots. We'll take our chances here, because I guess maybe what they're looking at it too is not everyone has a sharpshooter on their team at this point, or they put the pressure on just enough that you're thinking we have to tense up and we have to get these points because we know they're one of the best teams in the country. Maybe that's just what it is too. Maybe it's an intimidation factor. It's the only thing I can really think of with them, that all these other teams just start losing their minds against them, that it's so much so that they don't even really have to play up to their ability, that the other teams kind of let them into these games.
So let's do sports radio here, because It's one of the worst endings I've ever seen. Like, we can go through the whole game and go, this is some of the reasons why they got to that point. But the fact that they had 19 seconds on the clock, could slowly bring the ball up court to take a chance to tie or win the game, and never even got a shot off and looked ridiculous doing it. It's one of the worst endings I've ever seen in my life in any level. So I was like trying to rack my brain, like, what are the worst things I've ever seen? Tony Romo bobbled a snap on an extra point.
Sure.
And everybody remembers this was the early stage of the kicking balls, and that one was really slick. And everyone started to complain that like it was different than the other balls that they had handled. And that started the whole thing where you've got to let the punters and the kickers scuff them up before they actually go into the game, because something like this would happen. But that's one of them that was like, just hit me. I'm like, that inexplicably basically ended a game. Like, it's the most ridiculous ending you could have, that someone would bobble a snap on an extra point because of a slick ball. Like, that's why they lost to Seattle that day.
Yeah. I have one where it's more about the sudden endingness of it, and looking back about how bad it was. Caps won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and then you'll probably remember this better than others because you actually follow the Caps. In 2019, they lost to the Hurricanes in 7 games. And
yeah, but they blew a series lead.
They blew a series lead. They lost in Game 7. But I remember in Game 7, they had two goal leads at different points in that game. And eventually, Carolina ties it. It goes to overtime. And the Capitals lose in overtime. They lose in Game 7. You and I were pissed that day, and people that follow the team. But really, the overarching factor was, oh, they won a Stanley Cup last year. It's okay, whatever. Right. You end up looking back on it. I remember saying this at the time, but looking back on it, it's even worse. Nicholas Backstrom had one of the best years of his career that year. TJ Oshie was pretty healthy. Alex Ovechkin did what Alex Ovechkin did, scored a bunch of goals. Looking back at it, Backstrom was never the same. TJ Oshie was never the same, because then the COVID season happened and these guys got banged up and it was never the same. And I just remember the feeling after it was like, oh, it's okay that they won their cup. No, like, looking back at it, they should have moved on. And if you looked at the field that year, I think it was Toronto, who was really good, got bounced early, as normally happens with them. I remember there was a way and a pathway for them to actually win the cup again. I think it was Boston that played St. Louis that year. I'm pretty sure that was the year where the Blues won. Remember, the Caps had rooked Boston all year long. They would have played Boston in either the next round or the Eastern Conference final. That, to me, is one of my worst endings. No one really talks about it, but they should have won a second Stanley Cup. It was right there. They should have made a second final, bare minimum. That's one of mine. Hurricanes had zero business knocking them out that year, and they did.
I mean, I have 2 on the Caps, and one is really old that I think is an inexplicable ending. But one of the famous, and Washington, back in the day, had this penchant for when they went to overtime in the playoffs, it was literally not going to go the right way.
Yes.
And if it went to multiple overtimes, you were just sitting there in dread, knowing it was one of the famous ones that ended was against the Islanders and Pat LaFontaine. But the goal that he scored was a ridiculous goal. It was from near the blue line. Yeah. It was just dumped towards the goal and it went in. So it was one of these triple overtime. After all that, at 3 a.m, it was a fluke, total fluke that it went in. And it was, it was like one of those, it was early in the days of, we're just going to get our heart broken like this. But you're not supposed to lose like that. Yep. Like, it's one thing if some guy makes some crazy play and just beats your goaltender, you can live with it. Like, one of the all-time great Caps moments is Dale Hunter, Game 7, where he gets a breakaway and makes a beautiful goal and they win. This wasn't that. They had played for 7 hours straight and it ended on a complete fluke. It was a complete fluke how they lost.
Yeah, you're referencing the Easter epic that did go until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and it was probably the most ridiculous postseason game maybe in NHL history at that point. Yeah, that was one where, looking at how that game ended, you're like, oh, that's how we're doing this one. That's how we're going to end it.
The other Caps one that really stands out to me actually goes back to the period where they were the best team in the regular season in hockey, and by far. And in 2010, they won the President's Trophy and had an absurd amount of points, like 120, something like that. They'd outscored the league by a mile, and they blew a 3-1 series lead to the 8 seed. And 2 of the losses in 2 of the 3 games were 2-1. So, like, that's different, but it is somewhat in it. Like, when you have a team that does the things it does, and then they are the polar opposite of themselves, like 2 minutes later, that doesn't ever make any sense, and it's always hard to swallow.
Yeah, this was one that I didn't pick because I know you were probably going to pick it. So I was going to defer it to you. This is one of the, I think this might be the worst series in the Ovechkin era history. Looking at how everything went down, there was already talk of Carey Price getting benched in this series. And the joke was don't beat him up too much because this Yaroslav Halak guy is actually pretty good. He's been pretty good this season. They did that. Halak comes in. The Habs end up winning and beating him in this series. And Halak has an NHL career that basically hasn't ended because the Caps lost to them in that series. That to me is the most heartbreaking one of the Ovechkin era because it was first round and you never got to see really what was going to come to fruition after that too. That was the first, I think, huge, big, heartbreaking loss for the Caps in this era.
Yeah. I mean, for the Wizards, it's hard to find anything because they just didn't do much.
Right.
But, I guess John Wall breaking his hand in the playoffs was a horrific ending for them. But there's no one to blame there. And it's not inexplicable. And it's terrible. It just kind of falls in the category of we're just not going to win with this team because this was one of the better teams that they had. Like the other ones in that era where they were pretty good. No one thought they were going to win a championship, but everything went sideways the second he broke his hand in the playoffs. And so that stands out to me for them because I can't think of anything else. What, Popcorn Russ? I mean, there's nothing you can really think of that because they haven't been competitive very much. There's been a couple of Gilbert years, but even in those, it was the same thing with when you said about the Caps, winning, losing the series to the Hurricanes, but off a cup year where everybody was that's fine. Well, the year that they beat the Bulls in the playoffs under Gilbert, people were just that's great. We actually did that because we hadn't done anything like that in so long.
Right.
Instead of, we got beat the next round. No one seemed to care because we had lost so much. No one really cared.
Well, in the one that you referenced, they lost to the Cavs, right? They lost to LeBron. And there was a bunch of drama in that series. And everyone went, oh, it's LeBron, whatever. And I remember going, BS. This team wanted to smoke with LeBron. On the broken hand one, too, it's not often that I feel like this, especially watching a team up close and being a homer. But that series when he broke his hand, it was instantly, there's no way they're winning.
There's no way.
It doesn't
air out of the balloon.
Yeah.
Now you're just on a death march. You're going to lose. You just don't know how.
It doesn't happen often, but when you have a team like that Wizards team was built and you knew he was the straw that stirred the drink and was the emotional leader and everything, it was over. I remember that happened and people were talking, well, can he play with one hand? That's how desperate it was because they knew it was over if he was not going to set foot on the court, and it was over at that point.
For the Nationals, for me, I mean, there's a specific game that they blew against the Cardinals that was a huge lead.
Yeah.
But that was one game, and that was slow motion, terrible things happening. There was no inexplicable ending to it, and it was tough to watch. It was like you're watching a car wreck 50 times over when that happened. But the one about them that I will never forget is Dusty's last series against the Cubs, where they had a setup where they went to the law firm every night in a specific order. And Dusty Baker, this is why I was when everyone was defending him, I'm absolutely not. He chose the absolute worst time to quote unquote go with his gut. And he changed something that had worked 25 out of 25 times. And you know what? It was karmic response. It would be a bloop single or some kind of ridiculous thing that would happen. It was self-made, and it also was inexplicable that it happened. And it's the one I remember about them that I watched and I went, we did this to ourselves. This is terrible. There will be no real explanation for this when they lose.
That was one that I had circled as well, especially if you remember that last Cubs game of the series was bonkers. There was a bunch of lead changes, and then they eventually fell, as the Nats did, because they didn't win a playoff series literally until the World Series year. I have that one. I circled 2012. You're right. It wasn't really much of an ending, but it was one of those moments where the whole stadium knew Drew Storen was spent. He couldn't find the strike zone. They left him in too long. The Cardinals tie the game. Jason Worth, if you remember, used the magic up in game 4 with that epic at bat and hit a walk-off home run. The magic was just out, though, by that point. So 2012 was, you're right, it was like a slow motion car wreck. But I think everyone in the stadium knew. The one I'll go with, too, maybe it's not an ending, but it should have been an ending. In 2014, remember they played the Giants. And I think it was game 2 at home. I don't think it was game 3. I think it was game 2. Jordan Zimmerman had thrown a no-hitter. He was like on one of his best years of his career. He pitched into the 9th inning against the Giants. Matt Williams came out, took him out. I believe he put Drew Storen in, or he put in another reliever. My mind is escaping me. And instead of the game ending, they give up the game tying run. And instead of the game ending, the game went for 18 innings, Bram. Like, that was one where it should have been over. And they played a whole other game. Like, the game started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I didn't pull into my driveway until 1 a.m. Like, that was one of those ones where we're going, well, in another universe, like, I'm home on time, and they win that game, and maybe they win the series. And I remember Bryce Harper was really good that series, too. Like, it was one of the ones where you didn't blame him at all on that one. Adam LaRoche had, like, 1 hit or something like that. It's not an ending, but it should have been an ending, so I'm going to slide it in there for the Nationals because they literally played a whole other game for that mistake that happened with Williams.
This one isn't a literal ending, but it feels like it, like, because we did the spirit matches last year. For the championship to end the way that it did, with 1 goal between the 2 highest scoring teams, or 2 of the 3 highest scoring teams, and that goal was beyond controversial and never should have counted in the first place. And it happened in the first half. But I remember being on the broadcast saying over and over as time was ticking off, if this is the only goal that ends up being scored, there's going to be a lot of discussions about whether this was a fair outcome. And the league better pray that Washington scores here so that if they lose in the end, they won't look back at that. And it was terrible. And I remember the part I hated the most was after it, where everybody went on like shows and tried to explain almost from a league perspective how it was actually okay. And I know I'm biased because I'm, doing the team that lost, but I'm like, I really just want some honesty here. That goal should have never counted. So I don't know who would have won this match. All I do know is that goal should have never counted.
Yeah, there was not another equalizer, and then it's the only highlight of the match. So you have to keep showing it over and over and over again. I remember that was the dagger and the twisting of the knife was they had to keep, showing that one. I'm with you. I hated that one. I actually didn't really even think about that one. But yeah, that ends up being a 1-0 game against the highest scoring teams in the league. And it ends up being the deciding goal. That was a bad one. I do have one more. I have one more for you. Do you have any Redskins football team Commanders ones? Do you have any?
Like in recent memory, the hardest one, I mean, there's 2. Like I have to go back when I was young. The Super Bowl against the Raiders was so embarrassingly terrible. And what came out after, like where the team was actually, stuck in a second-rate motel, like it's a very different time. And then secondarily, they've openly kind of admitted that they didn't prepare themselves the way they probably should have. But there were plays in that game. Like this is one of the best teams ever. And there were plays in that game that were literally embarrassing. Marcus Allen's crazy run for a touchdown, Jack Squirick's interception on a screen pass for a touchdown. Like they just embarrassed themselves. So it was one of those, they had just won the Super Bowl. They got back to the Super Bowl and played the worst game of the Joe Gibbs era. And that one stands out. And then I guess in a little more recent times, the botched snap against Tampa in the playoffs is a terrible ending to a playoff game with one of the Turk brothers. But I always like to remind people that was a 52-yard field goal that was going to have to be made. So this wasn't a chip shot. Like that's 50-50 at best that would have happened anyway, that they would have made that kick, but you never know because they botched the snap and they never actually got that off. In recent years, because they hadn't won very much until last year, it's hard to look back at any particular ending and go, well, that was awful. You could probably pick a bunch of games that feel awful for sure.
I mean, I feel like you have to mention 2012. Like
RG3 in the playoffs.
It might not have been a play.
Yeah.
But like we all saw how his knee bent and we knew it was over. Like, sure, we talked about it for a year or a whole offseason and, all in for week 1. But if you were in the building, you knew that the comet had flown by. Like, it might not have been an ending of a game, but I remember I've never been walking out of any stadium or arena in my life where
Yeah.
nobody was talking, like nobody was saying anything. It was a funeral after that game because everyone knew we had the guy and now we don't. It was over within 4 months of drafting or 6 months of drafting him or whatever
It was, I had been at ESPN for 4 years at that point. Obviously, I'd covered the team for 8. So I'd been around it a ton. And it was their first home playoff game since 1999 or something like that. And so I came home I still had season tickets. I was a season ticket holder, and I came home for it. I typically either gave my tickets away or sold them back then because I wasn't going. I was in Connecticut working on weekends. So I always just watched games. I never went, but I'm like, I've got to go. It's their first home playoff game. And I went, and I remember being in the crowd and watching him deteriorate throughout the game. And I remember just thinking, I verbalized it to whoever, I can't remember who I was with, but I verbalized, I go, they got to take him out. I'm like, he's going to get hurt. Like, you can just see it. Look how he's walking. Like, I appreciate he's trying to be tough and tough this thing out, but the team needs to get in the way and stand in the way. And when he crumpled to the ground, I think we all knew at that point that a lot of bad decisions were made. I mean, this is not unlike what happened with Gilbert Arenas, where my complaint about the end of his career, forget the gun stuff, but his knee stuff, was the team did not do what was in his best interest. They didn't get in his way to stop him from coming back too soon, and it made his knees worse. And he never recovered from it physically. This is what happened with Robert. Nobody stood in the way of him and said, I'm sorry, you can't play anymore. We're trying to protect you. I know this is a playoff game, but like, we need to keep you healthy. They didn't do that. He didn't do that for himself. Everybody was wrong. And when he went down on the ground, it changed everything. It was awful.
No, exactly right. And like, I remember he went down and like Kirk comes in, but it was over. Like, they were not coming back. Seattle's really good that game. I think the worst part about, not the worst part, but one of the worst parts about that game was, remember, they went up 14-0. Like, they were up by 2 scores very fast in that game. And then it all slowly deteriorated. And as I said, I don't know if I've ever been a part of a crowd leaving a game that was just somber and everyone knew it was over. And like I said, we ended up talking about it for like a year or two after, but you really knew he was never going to be the same again after that. That was to me one of the worst endings of a game. And I know it wasn't the specific play, but the worst ending of a game I think I've ever seen live in person, because the ramifications of it were, you just knew, like, you also knew they weren't going to tear the Band-Aid off either. It was going to be a try, and him trying to come back and Shanahan trying to do it and then getting another coach to try to coach. Like, I just knew when it happened, there were going to be so many ripple effects that we were in it for a terrible couple of years. And we were essentially at that point.
2 other quick ones. Like, and these are like the inexplicable, you hate them endings. The Orioles hadn't won a World Series in a very long time, and they had really good teams in the 90s. And there was an incident with a kid in the outfield named Jeffrey Mayer who reached over the outfield wall at Yankee Stadium and clearly interfered with the ball, and the call didn't go their way. The most famous incident of this, of course, is Bartman. We had one in the World Series last year with these idiots at Yankee Stadium who, at least it was called correctly, and they kicked these people out. But like, that happened again where they were ripping a ball out of Mookie Betts' glove. Like, that was nuts that was happening. But this was one of those, it wasn't the ending, but it was we're just not going to win. Like, and this is going to be marred. And this kid's going to become the memorable person of the series instead of the teams that actually played in it. It was awful. Like, if you ask people now, name 5 Marlins who were on the field for the Bartman incident, or name 5 Orioles, you're going to have a hard time doing it. But when I say the name Jeffrey Mayer, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And that was awful for them. And the other one was for Maryland basketball. They lost in the Final Four to Duke after blowing an enormous lead. So that's a bad ending. But what was worse was in that era when they were both top 5 teams and Carlos Boozer and Jay Williams were playing for Duke and Steve Blake and Juan Dixon, all of them were playing for Maryland. There was a game down at Maryland where they blew a 9-point lead with a minute to go to Duke. And I remember everyone called it gone in 60 seconds. And I can't remember the exact details of all the things that occurred. I'd probably have to look it up. But the sequence, if you were to look at it again, the sequence of the things that went wrong throughout that minute to make that actually happen, It was awful to relive, and it probably was maybe the worst home loss I can ever remember of an extremely competitive Maryland team, and how the height of that rivalry, to do it against them, and then it was ugly afterwards. People were throwing stuff at Carlos Boozer's mom. It was really, really ugly in the building. That was a terrible, terrible loss.
Yeah, I had erased the Gone in 60 Seconds loss from my mind. And as you know, I'm not the biggest Maryland guy, but yeah, that was a brutal one too. And you're right, like that was the height of that rivalry where Duke and Maryland, I guess Maryland wasn't Duke's biggest rivalry, but Duke was Maryland's biggest rivalry.
By far,
and as you like to say too, the New Jersey, New York fan kind of came out in those matchups and they got really, really ugly.
It was bad. All right, let me take a quick break. If you have others, you can DM me. Maybe I'll talk about them later this week. I'll get back into some football next. Prairie Boss, the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. My wish seems to be heading towards coming true because it's Roger Goodell's wish, according to Pro Football Talk. So I was surprised this didn't come up in the owners' meetings, but apparently is going to come up in a subsequent one very, very, very soon. And that is, according to Pro Football Talk, Roger Goodell personally wants to change the playoff seeding. Now, I don't know that this is true. I haven't vetted all of this. I'm not someone who bashes Florio because he does take what appears to be some positions that other insiders don't seem to take. And I don't want to get in a position of who's right, who's wrong. I actually believe him most of the time. And he may throw some stuff on the wall to see if it sticks, but I don't think he does it as a hot take artist. I think he does it because he does have sourcing too. So I believe him here. His reporting is suggestive of the Lions were the team that submitted this. That seems a little odd considering they were the 15-2 team, and the 14-3 team is the one that ended up playing a road playoff game. That Week 18 game had humongous ramifications. The teams with the best two records were not going to be 1-2 in the standings by the end of it. And so it was a little anticlimactic that the team that did get the number one seed is the one that applied to change the seeding. You know how I feel about this. I want this changed. I am all for, if you win your division, you're in. Period. I don't care what your record is, but that doesn't mean you get a home playoff game. That means you just get in. And if you are 9-8 and the other team is 14-3, the 14-3 team hosts the playoff game, period. That's how I feel about it.
I think we're at the point now where it's actually, because I think I was thinking about this a little bit in the wrong way. I think it's actually not about the teams that had all the winning records. It's about now we've had a few too many instances of the 9-8 team, or remember in the Ron year, 7-9 team.
Yes.
Making the playoffs and still getting a
that happens once every 5 years. A team with an under 500 record wins a bad down division and gets in.
And now I think it's paired though with what happened last year, where you had a division that had three teams that should have been the top three seeds essentially. And I know tiebreakers and all that, but like essentially the NFC North should have had the 1 and 2 seeds last year, right?
Of course.
And so I think what he's getting at this point is we can't have this anymore, because you also look at the landscape of the league, and like that division is poised to do that every year now for at least the next 3 or 4 years, as long as things stay stable a little bit, right? And that's not even counting if the Bears end up getting good too, right? So I'm not surprised that this is coming. I will have to say though, like I hate it because I feel like it's a slippery slope of, well, why do divisions matter if they don't give you a home game? And I know they probably won't go that route, but I just don't like that we're about to hit that slope, and I don't want to get rid of divisions either. I don't think they will, but I feel like the argument's going to be there that it does happen.
Maybe. This is why I think what you need to protect in this, you win your division, you are in. Therefore, the divisions don't look at the standings and go, well, someone's going to win it, but they're not going to get in. It would keep the competitive balance down the stretch no matter what, even in down division years, because it will get you into the playoffs by winning your division. But I don't think it should guarantee you a home game. I think it should just get you into the tournament. And like it's unfair when you are like, okay, let's take our teams this year. We may be in the same exact situation that we were in a year ago. I hope we are. I hope we're a double-digit win team, 12-win team. Well, what if Philadelphia is as good as they were a year ago again, right? Like at some point, shouldn't we be hosting the playoff game, or shouldn't they be hosting the playoff game if the team they end up playing is the 4 seed who happened to be in the bad division this year? And I don't know which one but like, if I told you the NFC West isn't going to be very good this year, you would believe me. Like, the Seahawks just got rid of Geno Smith. They got Sam Darnold coming in. You look at their roster and you go, I don't know what that is. Clearly, the 49ers are resetting. The Cardinals may or may not be good. They might be okay. The Rams look pretty good, but they're like a clear runaway winner of that thing as we sit right now, right? That's a down division. We're not in one of those. The NFC North isn't in one of those. Sure. They're playing a buzzsaw. So, like, that's the other part of this. Like, if you end up winning a division like that, or you end up surviving a division like that, shouldn't you be rewarded for that, as opposed to the team that went 5-1 against 3 teams that all had 6 wins each? Like, shouldn't you be rewarded for that?
No, I mean, I don't disagree with you on that. I just, like I said, I feel like the slippery slope is there. I don't think they do it, but I'm just saying we could get to a point where all of a sudden the divisions don't matter. But hopefully it stays the way it is in terms of you are rewarded if you win it.
You can't have divisions if you're not going to put the division winner in the playoffs.
Correct.
And I don't want to lose divisions because I want to play Dallas twice a year. I want to play Philly twice a year. I want to play the Giants twice a year. I think those traditions are important. And I think you're going to make a humongous mistake if the Bears aren't playing the Packers twice a year, or Pittsburgh's not playing Baltimore twice a year, or Cincinnati's not playing Cleveland twice a year. You're going to be making a humongous mistake if you do something like that. So I do want to protect the divisions, but I just want some level of fairness in playoff seeding. Just because you win doesn't mean you get, like, just because you win your power conference in the NCAA tournament doesn't mean you're a 1 seed.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Like, I think you have to qualify it. And in this way, just do it by record. Like, the Commanders and Eagles are going to be playing what looks to be, and you never know because things change and you get surprised every year. It's why I love the NFL. You really don't know, like, who's going to end up being good, bad, whatever. No one thought we were going to be good this year. But it looks like that both of those teams are playing an extraordinarily hard schedule with the AFC West and the NFC North. Well, that means other divisions aren't playing teams of that caliber, let alone in the case of someone like the Rams, who is in a division where it looks like the other 3 teams are kind of behind them for a year and might be resetting. And maybe they're better than we think they are, but maybe they're not. It's not fair. Like, there is no equitable. There is no way to, like, stack this up and say everybody played the same amount of teams, so that's what it is. Everybody's schedules are actually very different in the NFL. Washington's and Philadelphia's looks like it's going to be, on paper, really hard this year to get through with a really good record. Therefore, winning that division, to me, you're in no matter what. I don't care. But if you somehow end up with double-digit wins, especially in a scenario like that, I don't know how you don't reward that team with at least a home playoff game if they do have a better record. I will go with a tiebreak situation. If you're the wild card team and the division team has a better record than you, or has the same record as you, they get the home game. Or I would even buy, if you played them.
That's what I was going to say.
But the problem is, if you're seeding by record, then you'd have a better record than them. I will go with, if you have the same record as them, the team who won the division gets the home game. I would be totally down with that. That's the tiebreaker. You won your division, you get the home game. Fine.
That would have to be after a head-to-head, though, because that's where you get weird. Like, let's say last year, let's say Tampa and Washington have the same record and they were playing each other, and you let's just, like, flip it that Washington won the division or something, but Tampa beat them in the regular season. I do think you flip that on its head a little bit. I think you do that, because I think that would also make it for a little bit more fun, and the NFC games do mean just a little bit more, that this could come back to bite you at the end of the season. I've kind of argued that yes, there's a lot of money on the line for all these playoff games, but make the head-to-heads count a little bit more in the regular season. Like, let's say last year, Washington, let's say this rule had happened and Washington had won, 12 games and they're going up against Tampa, and they did win their division and they beat Washington. Like, that supersedes it. Like, I think you could have a rule that does that as well, where you did survive them and, won your division. I'm just saying, there are a couple little caveats here that I think they could make to make it a little bit more interesting too.
Now, Florio brings us up, and I agree with this. Like, okay, so we're talking about equity, fairness. You got a certain record. Why are you the 5 seed when you had the second best record in the NFL? And maybe that won't happen very often, but it happened last year, and it happens every year that teams with better records are on the road. Washington played on the road in the playoffs with a better record than the team that they played. Granted, they lost to them in week 1, but they had a better record than them. That somewhat is ridiculous that they're the road team after having a better record than them through the regular season. Still, on the other side of it, the Week 18 game that we referenced earlier, Detroit, Minnesota, which was kind of for all the marbles, one's going to be the 1 seed, one's going to be the 5 seed because of the way the seedings are. Well, that game's got no relevance whatsoever if they're the 1-2, no matter what the outcome is. So there is another side to it where if you do want this competitive balance thing, well, that one does get lost amid 2 really great teams who probably would have rested everybody at that point and went, I don't know, I'm the 1 or the 2. What's the point of trying to get hurt here? I'm going to get a home game next week anyway. I'm going to be one of the top 2 seeds anyway. Why don't we put the backups in and find out if we get lucky and we get the 1 seed out of it and not risk getting Justin Jefferson hurt this week?
No, I mean, that's fair. I'll give you that one. And especially because you looked at that game too. I mean, Detroit was already banged up. They got more banged up in that game. I'm not.
But they played.
Yeah, yeah,
because
exactly.
it mattered. Because it mattered.
Correct. And so, I mean, I'll give you that a little bit. That like maybe you don't have to do things like that, but the NFL is going to push back and say everybody watched that game because everyone knew what was on the line too. So like the argument there is you take some of the drama out of it a little bit too.
Yeah, I would think though, and I would think the owners would want this too, to be honest, the change, because the home game's worth a lot of money. So you don't think the Harris group is sitting there going, we're 12-5, we're on the road against a team with a worse record than us? How does that even make any sense? Or Minnesota who goes, we were 14-3 and we're playing as a 5 seed where the likelihood is we never play a home playoff game? That's kind of crazy. Like, that's a little crazy. So I'm hoping this happens. It sounds like Goodell wants it to. All right, let me take a quick break. Bray wants to show ESPN 630 at Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. There was some news on the coaching staff yesterday with the Commanders as the former longtime great Patriots receiver, played for other teams as well, but was obviously great with Tom Brady, was Wes Welker, who's been a coach around the league for a little while, is joining the Commanders staff. He recently did work directly with Deebo Samuel when he was out in San Francisco. So there's kind of a link, I think, to bringing him back. And then people are making a kind of what I think is a little bit of a stretch and a little bit unfair because they're like linking him to he's the one that monitors Deebo, whether he stays in the type of shape that they want him to stay in that type of shape. And I'll let Deebo and Welker address something like that. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but they're bringing in someone. It does feel a little bit like they are bringing in a coach Deebo's very comfortable with to help him assimilate into what they're doing here because, you know, this isn't the same offense that he was in. This is not from that tree. This is actually very different under Cliff Kingsbury. So Welker's going to have to get up to speed with what's going on with Kingsbury. And I think it's interesting that they have a very long-held relationship from playing with each other in college. And at the same time, it does feel a little bit like, and I'm going to help you incorporate your new really good dynamic weapon into this offense all at the same time. So it all makes a lot of sense to me that they brought him in here.
No, exactly right. Like, you know, for all intents and purposes, you might only get a year of Deebo. So you might as well you might as well try to like get as much as you can out of him. And if that means bringing in Wes Welker, I'm completely okay with it. I'll say this too. I liked Welker on the Dolphins Hard Knocks show a couple years ago. I actually liked when they went into the wide receiver room and Tyreek Hill was there, but their wide receiver group was fine. Like, it was pretty solid. Tyreek was obviously the number one guy, but I actually liked what I saw from him there because it was one of those things. This happens all the time where you forget guys are still in the league. I forgot he was a coach in the league, to be completely honest. And when they went to him, it was actually pretty good. So when I saw that yesterday, I kind of perked up and said, okay, I liked what I saw from him there. And looking at the history with Deebo and, you know, the hit job they did on Deebo on the way out, Welker was a part of that about keeping him in shape and all that stuff too. So look, this can only help as far as I'm concerned. I don't see a downside of it. And, you know, they are also looking to develop some of their own wide receivers, right? Like, how does this help with Luke McCaffrey, right? Can
Hopefully.
he give him, does this give him some pointers and that they can develop him a little bit? Because
KJ Osborne, hopefully.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Like, I think they've got some young guys on this team that could probably use some words of advice, and hopefully Welker can help that. And I know, too, like the official title for Welker isn't it a scout or a personnel type gig too? Like, it's not officially a coach, but it's
he's not the wide receiver coach.
Right, exactly. So I will say this too. Like, I wonder what else he's going to have his hands on here. And I, like I said, I don't mind bringing in a mind like that to this organization at all. So.
No, I don't either. The Debo thing is really fascinating. Like, most of the time when you acquire someone like this, they demand an extension immediately. Tunsil has a couple years left. So I think that they can play out the string for 1 year. And if it goes really well, as he said in his press conference, they know how I feel about this. That means come next year, I do expect you to rework it. And honestly, it'll probably be beneficial to Washington's cap to do so if Tunsil is still Tunsil, which is the hope. With Debo, he's in the last year of his contract. They did right by the last year of it by guaranteeing the majority of it, but they gave him no guarantees beyond it. And he seems totally happy with that. So it's a really interesting dynamic. And that's why I like this too. It's in his best interest, Debo's, to be the guy he was a couple of years ago, because the contract next year, whether it's here or somewhere else, will not be the same if he does not live up to that. So this is a very, very, very interesting dynamic. I want to end on what I've just kind of casually mentioned early. And it's the last thing what I love about Alex Ovechkin. Reported that he turned down, or actually Ted Leonsis said it on, I think the Junkies or Grant and Danny or somebody today, yesterday. I forgot. I'm sorry. I forgot who, but it was on that station. He said that Alexander Ovechkin turned down the Tonight Show, and so which would lead you to believe he's turning down a lot of things. And I remember we were talking about this yesterday, and I went, he's going to be asked to do a lot of things, and it's good that they don't play for a few days, because if he wants to do that, he just can do that. And he's like, no, it's time to get back into potentially winning the Stanley Cup. They could eat their cake and eat it too. And I love it. I love every second of that it's like, this is over. Thank you for helping me do this. Now let's get back to us.
I think what happened here too is he did this at a weird point in the schedule as well, right? Where they have 3 days off, like they're going to have morning skate today and tomorrow and then on Thursday morning, but it also gave him a unique opportunity to rest up a little bit here. So I'm not surprised that he looked at the schedule and went, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and take a rest, reflect on this for a little bit, hit the reset button, and then get ready for the stretch run. It's just who Ovechkin is, too. He cares about his teammates and his coach and his organization. So this is Ovechkin to a T. I'm not surprised. And you know what? Like, if they want to do something after they get eliminated, maybe. But, like, we all kind of know how the news cycle works. He is foregoing any kind of extra exposure. But I don't think he really cares about that. I think he knows his legacy is what it is. And as long as he's the leading goal scorer, that's a lot of pub just in and of itself.
Tomorrow, I will be sharing with you a conversation I have with John Walton, voice of the Washington Capitals, after what happened over the last, 20 years, let alone the last weekend. So I'm excited to do that for you tomorrow. So we'll talk to you then. Brave Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.